Now, customary and polygamous marriage are just, I guess, to some people, the cornerstone of many traditional communities across the country. But the arrangement often leaves women in these unions voiceless. Recently, the South African Law Reform Commission has called for new marriage laws advocating for the rights of women in customary arrangements. To help us thrash out the issues involved here, let's bring in our guests. We're now joined via our video link by cultural enthusiast Mbuso Khosa, as well as customary law expert Zama. Mopai. To both of my guests, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM Report. Zama, let me begin with you by just asking that as a start to help us sort of place this conversation. What rights, as the situation stands, are afforded to women, especially in polygamous arrangements, and why are those problematic if they are?
Thank you, Ayanda, and good morning to all the viewers. Most people would probably know by now that customary marriages are now recognized in South Africa, and they're actually recognized in their nature. And one of that aspect being that they are polygamous, potentially polygamous. So when the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act came into force, it somehow put into place certain regulations on customary polygamous marriages, because in the past, a customary polygamous marriage would not have certain legal consequences, especially where property is involved. So starting from the RCMA, what we have is that a woman or a man, let's start there, a man who wishes to enter into a further customary marriage with another woman, the act, we're going back to the RCMA before the new development, the RCMA would require that such a man must actually have a contract that will regulate the new proprietary system of his old marriage and the incoming wife. So that on its own was a development, but then there were certain challenges here and there because the act did not necessarily specify the requirement for the consent of the existing wife, except to protect the proprietary system of that marriage. So what we now have in this new proposal is just a further development that whilst we already have a law in place that protects or that seeks to protect the proprietary consequence, meaning that when my husband bring in a new wife, what happens to my property? Is he going to share what I have built with him with her? How am I protected? So the RCMA made provision for that, although in some Supreme Court of Appeal decision, that contract that a man and his wife would have to sign, there was no consequence to a man failing to do that. But now with the new law, it proposes that he needs and he has to obtain the consent of his wife or his wives if he's bringing ed and so forth wives. And then now there needs to be a clear contract. There needs to be a clear determination on how the property system of the whole family is going to be regulated so that no one gets out of the marriage unprotected or no one is unprotected, because most of these things you would realize at an unfortunate circumstance like death. Then that's when you realize that, oh, we're in a polygamous marriage, but we're not all legally protected. So I've built wealth with this man, or I have property with this man, but I'm not protected because my marriage with him is in a certain way.
Yeah, Mbuso, if we can bring you into this conversation, I imagine this brings an opportunity for a charged debate about how this is actually going to look like on the ground, so to speak. On the face of it, it sounds noble to be giving women in polygamous marriages a whole lot more agency. But what complications could it potentially bring when all the women need to consent that a man now needs to take on an additional wife? What are you foreseeing to be some of the challenges here?
I think the challenges will be about shaking the patriarchal system now, because this is how in the olden days this thing was done. a woman would see responsibilities piling up in a household, because in the olden days there would be palaces, not what we have today. So a woman would say, hey, is it possible that I speak to that amazing woman that I've seen to join us in this household as a second wife, because the responsibilities have piled up? And then this thing will be taken to, the family meeting, and then it will be resolved, and then the woman would be married. So now things got changed over the years. Some experiences on men's side when they just see any woman they love and they want to marry them. And then that's not how polygamy is done. So I think this law that people are talking about now will help women to have a voice in a polygamous marriage. But another thing that we need to ask ourselves, is polygamy culture, or is it a choice of an individual? Because other nations are practicing the same thing. So for me, when you look at history, it's not culture. And other questions that we need to ask ourselves in the modern day, given all these challenges around our health system, STDs, since you do not condomize with your wife, how is the safety practiced in such a setup? So that would be my challenge.
Interesting you say that, because I can already kind of imagine a lot of people pushing back against even that perception, because the polygamous relationships obviously take on different forms in different contexts. What is consistent though, Zama, is that culture is ever evolving. It's never actually stayed the same. So in some respects, this change should be welcomed.
Most definitely. I understand what Ubaba is saying, that the way polygamy is done now, or the reasons for polygamy now, are not the same as then. But then we could start by answering the question, for other people, it's a choice. And where that choice is afforded, because one of the proposal in this paper is to afford people that equality to choose what they want, but then to still get protected. So the changes that are here because of the nature of customary law, things will not be the same as they were. The reasons for entering into a polygamous marriage might not be the same as they would have been in some previous years. So, but what do we do to make sure that everybody is protected? People are free to enter into partnerships or relationships of choice, but are not actually prejudiced in any way. Hence, we are now speaking that the subsisting marriages must actually be taken into consideration. The women who are already in the marriage, or the woman, if it's one wife, who is already in this marriage with this man who wants to marry another wife, she must be brought into the picture. Her interest must be protected. And where there is no reasonable prospect, or there's no way that anything good can come out of it, then the courts must be able to protect her. The law does protect her until such a time that for her man, her husband, to enter into the further marriage, she is protected, not only her, but also the woman who is coming. So we cannot, in a way, insist that this is how it was done in the past. People have changed, people's needs, the society has changed, but there needs to be protection where people enter into such contracts or such arrangements.
Of course, the amendments stretch further than just allowing women, for instance, to have a voice. That's what it comes down to, in who their husbands actually decide to marry moving further. But it also speaks about cohabitation rights and dispute resolution within family matters. Again, matters that typically a lot of people would say the government shouldn't be involved in. Mbuso, how do you see that aspect of this law? The idea that, the regulations need to be broad enough such that family disputes can also be escalated to that level.
I don't think that would be practical. I support the involvement of a current wife having a say, or if the man want to take a second wife. But to say families can have a say around this, especially in the judicial system, I doubt it will work because naturally it's difficult to sort family feuds. In my observation. So something like this, I think it needs a really carefully thread in terms of how it was done, because the configuration of mind, it has always to do with what happened before in order to develop the next idea. So now if you say just forget about what happened in the past and then do something in the modern day that we don't even understand how it was done before, then we'll have a problem. We need to understand the reason behind the polygamy and also understand when someone want to show off by having so many women in their household. Because in other cases, spiritual cases, there would be someone who is supposed to take a wife on behalf of someone that passed away who wants that symbol done on their behalf. That it's understandable. But in the modern day, the mindset of our people has changed. It's not like how it was before. Honesty in our people. I'm worried about that as we are, legalizing this thing that is not even part of culture, that is practiced all over the world. So to regulate and institutionalize love again, that is another issue that we need to look at. That how possible is that?
It
Because
does, yeah.
another thing, if families want to be involved legally in solving maybe or being part of this setup, the question is, over the years, it has not been successful. How are they going to apply new methods in trying to unpack all of this and making polygamous marriage work the way it should?
It's a multi-layered issue that was never going to be fully ventilated in a matter of minutes. Thanks nonetheless for helping us anchor our thoughts around this matter. The regulations are opened for public comments until the end of March, if memory serves me correctly. But thanks very much for your insights. Mbuso Khosa is a cultural enthusiast, and thank you very much to Zama Mopai as well, who's a customary law expert.